I'm Rebecca Chapman, and I'm here at Clo Senior Living with Clo Sydnor on February 26th, 2018. So do you want to start just telling me a little bit about your background, where you grew up?
I was born and raised in Missouri. They called it Pike County, Missouri. Raised on a farm most of my young life, and I had to be go back and forth to school. We didn't have a school bus, but there was a guy who had a panel truck, and he picked us up and took us to school every day. And I was kind of a tomboy growing up. I didn't like to do housework. I liked to work with my dad. So I learned to ride horses, milk cows, feed hogs, and drive a tractor. And by me being in the country and learning to drive a tractor, I became the first woman in the state of Colorado to operate heavy equipment and belong to the union. I helped build Aurora Mall and Chatfield Dam.
Wow.
So, and my grandmother was a school teacher. She was part Indian and part black, and she taught me how to read and picture read first, but I knew my ABCs. I could write them all by the time I got to first grade. We didn't have kindergarten back then, the first grade. So she was always into making me learn how to do things. And she always said, if you can read, write, and count, you will never be lost.
She's right.
So then when I became, I got out of high school when I was 15. Grade school. I went to Illinois, Jacksonville, Illinois for my first year in high school. And it was a mixed school. Well, there was 9 black kids out of 1,200 black kids. That was in 1949. So the teachers were all white, and they just paid me no attention if I put my hand up to answer, because I wasn't a dummy then.
Right.
So, but I told my parents I'd rather come back home and go to a black school where we only had about 5 teachers. And when I took up typing, I had to, in the wintertime, type with my gloves on because we didn't have heat there.
Because it was a black school?
Because it was a black school.
Wow.
Yes.
So at the school in Illinois, were you the only black kid?
No, it was 9 of us black kids out of a 1,200 high school. White kids, 1,200. So we weren't treated like we should have been treated. I was, I was kind of born with slew-footed, and I kind of like my dad. And when we would go to to the gym for practice, I had to walk around the whole gym floor. There was a line around it. The teacher was trying to get me to walk straight and not. But I was born like that. But I could have been a gymnast, and then it turned out my daughter was a gymnast here in Colorado. She was very good. She got it from me.
Yeah.
So, but I just didn't get to use it. So after that, and I become an adult and got married, and I've always wanted to fight for equality because all of our blood is red. And I call us a flower, like a flower garden. When the Creator, whatever you might call him, I call him God, he made different people, different colors. He's like the rose family. You have red roses, yellow roses, black roses, and I never see roses fighting.
Exactly.
He didn't want just everything to be one thing, like hollyhocks everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just kind of been a fighter, because before I left back home, I was married, and when my first child was born, he was 6 months old. We had a hospital there in one town. They had no blacks working in the nursing service. All you could do was sweep or cook, and I didn't really like either one of them. So I went one time and talked to the lady about hiring me for a nurse's aide. And it was so funny, all of the black people that I told I was going to go for the job, they said, they're not going to hire you, they're not going to hire you. I said, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm going to let them tell me. But the lady was very, very nice. She hired me, but she told me I had to be twice as good as the white girls. So I said, just hire me and try me. And that's just to learn how to carry a bedpan and make a bed.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it had been maybe 9 months, they hired another black girl. And in about 4 years, most of the nursing service was black. We had blacks driving from St. Louis, Missouri out to this little town because it was about 60 miles. It was called Troy, Missouri. And RNs was driving out there to work. So I worked in a dime store back home. There was no blacks that had ever worked there, behind the cash registers. I worked there because I thought, if you tell me no and it's something I really want to do, well, you're going to be bothered with me. I'm going to keep on trying, So that's kind of how my life has been. And when me and my husband decided to move to Colorado because he had an aunt and uncle there. My purpose for moving out of that area was my oldest child went to first grade there. And he had a little friend. They had mixed the schools by then back home. And he had a little friend, and he was a little white boy. And they was on the way home from school, and they stopped at this place, and they went in, and they told my son, 6 years old, that he had to go around to the back door, and the little white kid could go in the front door. Well, when the kids got home to my house, they both asked me, how come Mark had to go to the back door? I was young and I was very angry. And I said, ask your white teacher when you go back to school. But that day, I made up my mind that I was going to leave there and go somewhere else where I could be treated equal. So me and my husband decided, like the Beverly Hillbillies, we got together. He didn't go to second grade there. We'd moved out here by then. So when I got out here, it was better, much better, but it was still there. And we still have it. It's just that it has a different dress on now, I tell people. But to my black children, not my children, but the young black, you can do better. You don't have to just stand on the streets and let your pants hang down, and be somebody, be about something. Because I tell them, even if I had a business, I wouldn't hire you if you come in here with your pants hanging down.
Exactly. Yeah.
You've got to be presentable to work with the public. If you don't not presentable, you can cause a business to just go broke.
So when you were working as a nurse's aide, when you were the first black woman, were you treated differently by the other nurse's aides, or how was that?
Some of them I was, but there was one girl, and her name was Helen, and we just clicked right away. And she thought it was not right either, but that was probably the way she was brought up.
Right.
But we were very good buddies. We worked closely together. I helped her and she would help me. But then as time went on, they started acting much better, much better when they saw that this didn't rub off on them.
Exactly.
And I'm a human being just like them. It got much, much better. Same thing happened when I started operating heavy equipment. There was only white guys working. I worked in Longmont and Boulder before I come back to Denver. And the first 2 weeks I was there, they didn't say anything. They act like I was a skunk or something.
Really?
That's what I always say, because they didn't talk to me. But after a couple of weeks, I was just one of the guys.
Good.
Yeah, except every once in a while one of them would try to pat on me or something, like they're doing, turning all these men in.
Right.
To me, I think that's kind of natural for men to do things like that. But the ones that I didn't like patting, I stopped it. So, but that turned out to be great too. And I was on TV and I was in the newspaper, and I was so thankful because most of the time during that time, if you got on TV, it was because you'd done something wrong. I wrote to my mom and dad and told them I made it to TV and newspaper and I didn't do anything wrong.
What was the response from the public when you were in the newspaper and on TV?
Well, they kind of acted like I was a celebrity because I was in, what do you call that? It was 1976, bicentennial, 1976 I think it was. And it was headed downtown. A lot of people from all over the world was there. So they had a front end loader and me, and I was dressed in how I went to work, a hard hat and all that. And that was for about 3 days or so I was down there. And that was really nice because people from, some folks from Japan was over there and they was talking to me about it. And everybody wanted to know, how did I get a job like that? Well, I went to get a job like that because they said the flag girls made more money than I was making as a nurse's aide. I was traveling nurse's aide, go to different schools. And so I wanted to be a flag girl. So the guy interviewed me and everything, and he said, we're going to hire you. And then I was about ready to go, and he said, how would you like to operate heavy equipment? And I said, oh, can a lady do that? He said, yeah, if you're not afraid of tons and tons of weight. I said, like a bulldozer? And he said, yes. And that's just how it all started.
Yeah.
He hired me, and he found Mr. Phelps, the man that guy's probably dead, the one, but his company is still running. And well, first I had to go to training right out of Buckley. It wasn't houses and stuff out there. That I trained for 6 weeks, and then it was Flatiron Paving that hired me first from Longmont. It was Longmont and Boulder, and I worked in Longmont for a year and in Boulder for 2.5 years, and then we was off during the winter time. In springtime, I was at home, and one day the union called me and said that I can't think of the man's name now, but they needed an operator to go building the Aurora Mall. So they sent me out there, and when I got out there, Al Amadon was his name. He said, I asked for a operator, not a flag girl. And I had to show him my papers. I said, I am an operator. He said, well, what are they going to do next? Because I was the first woman. Right. Now, I won't say I was the first woman to operate. They didn't tell me that. But I was the first woman to operate and belong to the union.
Wow.
And I was on the plane once going to Detroit, Michigan. And the flight attendant and I was talking, and I told her what I was, and she announced it on the airplane, and everybody was just clapping their hands for me. And I'm a double minority too, because I'm black and a woman.
Exactly.
So it was very, very exciting. It was all real exciting. And then I was a foster parent on top of all of that too. About 36 children went through my home.
Wow. What motivated you to be a foster parent?
Well, I was divorced, but my aunt and uncle lived here, and they had a little girl. She was a foster parent too, and they had a young lady, and they asked me to keep her over a holiday. They went out of town, and she fell in love with me, and she wouldn't go back to them.
Really?
She's 63 years old today, and she still keeps in touch with me, and she was 14 then.
Wow.
Her grandkids and her kids, I helped her with them. I had a lot of children, even not through foster. My kids would have buddies, and they wanted to come spend the night. And I just found a picture of a little boy the other day that I don't know how old he might be now. I haven't seen him for so long. But he was a little buddy, and he'd come visit. He wasn't a foster kid. He just liked being at my house. And the Lord blessed me to have a big house. When I lived in Denver, I had a huge house, 13 rooms.
Wow.
And then when I went to Thornton, I had almost a brand new house. And I had 5 bedrooms in there, 2 full baths. So in my heart, I just like helping people. That's how I was raised. My mom and dad helped everybody. I don't care who you was. If you needed help, they helped you. If you're trying to help yourself. Now, Daddy, if you're not trying to help yourself, Daddy didn't do much fool with you. Right. But if you were trying to help yourself, they would do whatever they could. They took a family in one time that stayed 3 weeks with them. They had 3 children and the husband and wife, but that was because they'd had a bad storm back where I lived, and they had no electricity. Their whole house was electric, so they had to have somewhere to stay to keep from freezing to death. So I just
it's good. It's important. Do you have any specific memories from being a foster parent, or like of any kids who you really developed a connection with or anything?
Well, I spanked 4 of them, and I wasn't supposed to do that. And what I found out, I called the social workers and told them, but what I found out, the 4 that I spanked, they tended to love me more. And they asked me about 3 weeks afterwards if I spanked my kids, and I said I love them, and I love the foster kids too, but because I explained to each child when they would come in, there's many ways of love. I love you too, but I love you in a different way than I love my kids. And I love my kids in a different way than I love my parents. But it's all love. And so it let me know that it won't hurt to spank a child if you do it in the right way.
Right.
Because each one of the children that I spanked, they all had different social workers. And I called the social worker, each one of them, and when I told them what I had done, I've never been in the jail before, but I said, I'm ready to go because I'm not going to let a kid run my household. And all 4 of the social workers said, I didn't hear you. So...
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes. Of course, now that was back in the 70s and 80s, and they should do more spanking right now. Really, because the children today, they have no respect, not even for their parents or for anyone else. So I don't really like to be around little children today because I saw a little boy who couldn't say he had to go potty, but he could say SOB word.
You're kidding. Wow, yeah, it's bad.
So, and I think the young ladies today, they're having children way too young, but that's a deceitful way of the wrong spirit. We give little girls dolls from birth almost. They have everything but a daddy. So that's why they grow. I do believe that's why they grow up and they don't think a thing about not getting married or when they have the children. Well, see, my parents and the people that when I came along, they had morals. If you got pregnant, you had to get married, whether you lived together or not, because they wanted a legitimate grandchild.
Right.
And then, well, I had to have a son here. He had a child by a girl. And I had to go, I went to court and got him legal because they didn't get married either.
Right.
And the lawyer told me that worked for me, he said, when you have an illegitimate child, that it belongs to the state. The mother is just the next of kin. But he said, how are you going to call something legal that never was legal because they didn't marry? So he was a very good attorney, and it's a cute story behind that. I was working for some very wealthy people.
Doing what?
I was back doing nurse aid work.
Okay.
That's what I did most of my life. After I got through with the operating heavy equipment,
Right.
I was out for about 10 years out of the medical field because I learned how to drive semis over the road too.
Wow.
But they had a daughter-in-law, and she was a German lady, and she knew about my problem with the child. So she knew an attorney, and she told him all about me. And he and I took care of 9 months worth of business before he knew that I was black and poor.
Really?
And when the way he found out is he was going to meet with the child's mother. And he said, what does she look like? And I said, she's just a little cute brown girl, short brown girl. He said, a black girl? What is Kevin doing with a black girl? I said, well, what color do you think I am? He said, I didn't mean a thing by it, Flo, but the German lady didn't tell him about no color. She just told him about me. So he was assuming because she was white that I was white.
Wow.
So
That's interesting.
But he said that's okay, and he meant that because when we got all finished with it, my grandson was legally ours then. I forgot how much he charged, but I said, I'll have to make payments to you. And he said, if Kevin don't pay it, it's his child. He said, you won't pay it. He said, I'll make up the difference on somebody else. And he told me about a woman that was 70 years old that was getting child support because her husband had been to Vegas. They weren't married anymore. And he'd won all this money. And he was getting the money for her. And he said, I'll make it up on them because he won a lot of money. So
That's
I've kind of learned quite a bit, been here 82 years, and my mother used to tell me, don't just roll through earth and the world and not learn anything, so, and then I go to libraries and look up things, and so.
Yeah, did your kids go to college?
I had 2 that went to college, yes.
Did you?
Pardon?
Did you go to college?
1 year.
Okay, where?
Here, and after I had kids,
Okay.
I had a cousin that come and lived with me. Her mother and father were dead, and she was younger than I. So she wanted to get out of the small town where she was, so she lived with me for about 10 years. So I really didn't realize it, but I had a nanny. I worked and went to school too.
Wow.
I worked from 8 to 12, and then I would go to school from 1:30 to 4:30, because she was home to take care of the house and the kids and everything. So
Yeah.
she died very young from diabetes. She was 50 when she died. So I got 1 year of college in. Yeah.
Were you studying nursing?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, nursing, but it wasn't really nursing. It was about children, basically, because I remember childhood behavior, that class that I took up, because was dealing with kids of my own then too. So.
What are some of the differences that you've seen progress from like when you were in high school as a teenage girl to like the teenage girls that you fostered to now?
Well, it hasn't been really a lot of progression. It looks like regressing.
Yeah.
It's really, really changed. It's dangerous. There was a time when I could take my kids to like Elitch's downtown. It wasn't downtown at the time, but I could drop them off and tell them what time I was going to pick them up. And not one time did I have to think about somebody stealing them And my boys on Sunday, they used to go downtown and ride their bikes. I remember when they built the first garage where you could go in a circle, they enjoyed that. And it was just safer. Now, I'm afraid, as an older woman, I take somebody to the store with me in the daytime and I don't go out at night.
Yeah.
It's just so dangerous. So, to me, the world is regressing. And I read the Bible a lot, and we're living in some of the days that I've been reading about. There's no peace in the world, and Revelations talked about there's a rider, they call it a red horse, that the rider's on, and he come to take all the peace out of the world, and that's what's going on. There's no peace nowhere, honey. I had a little grandson when they killed the little children at Sandy Hook,
Yeah.
and he was in first or second grade. He lived in they still live in St. Louis, but he called me and he said, "Granny, I'm so scared to go to school. What if they do that to me?" I said, "Honey, we don't know what's going to happen. That's why you always say your prayers at night before you go to sleep, and that's all we can do. Granny's going to be praying for you, but you can't learn when you're afraid. And if a car would happen to go by and make a popping sound, that would scare them to death. From the time I was about 4 years old, and but 7 and 8, we didn't have things like that to worry about. What we had to worry about was a paddle. The teacher didn't carry a gun. She'd have the cleaning guy to make up some paddles. And she didn't believe in spanking a kid as soon as they did something. Every Friday was paddle day. At the end, she'd give about 15 minutes before time for school to be out. And she called it getting on the line. If you did something on Monday, that Friday you knew you was going to have to meet that paddle. And we all loved her. I mean, not my grandmother taught me for a while, but the other teacher that we went to, she was the same way. They wanted us to learn because they knew they were black teachers, all black school. They knew what it was like to be black, and they wanted us to learn all we could to be prepared for this world. And I'm so glad. I was telling a lady the other day, I'm so glad that I had all black teachers, because they knew of what we had to face. So they really put it in us.
Right.
So
do you think right now, I don't know if you are comfortable answering this or know the answer, but do you think right now black kids with white teachers have faced difficulties like those that you did not?
I don't think they teach them to their fullest to do their best. Now what they do with the boys, if they're big enough, they get them prepared to play football because you get a lot of money, but playing football is dangerous to your head. Because my grandmother used to say, you don't hit a child on their head or on their face because the good Lord made a better place. And now I'm seeing the football guys that their brains are really messed up.
Yeah.
Really messed up. I knew one guy real good because he had a baby by my foster daughter, Rick Upchurch. I knew really, really a nice guy, but today he's about 63 or 4 maybe today, and he's not totally off, but he's not right.
Because of football.
Because of football. And I went to church with a young man and his mother and father, and he is playing football now too. I think he's in his 10th year. Wonderful young man, but he's had to have so much surgery. By the time he's 35, he might be walking with a crutch, you know? And then licks on the head. To me, it looks like they point them toward where you're get a lot of money right away. But I'm telling children, we need black doctors, we need black lawyers, we need black engineers, you know, things that you can continue doing until you're 70 years old if you want to. You can't play football, not even at 50.
Yeah.
So I really think that should be changed.
Do you think it is? Like, since you were growing up, have you seen a lot of change or not significant change?
The change that I've seen is just our kids aren't really learning a lot. I don't know. The whole world has changed. Even since I was 50, it's a big change. And it isn't for the better. I'd like for it to be for the best. Now, we have a little black mayor down here, but we need more people. When President Barack Obama went in, it was just, I never ever thought I would see an actual black man. There was really 6 before him because they said if you have 1 drop of black blood in you, you're considered black. Well, Thomas Jefferson had it, Abraham Lincoln had it, he had it enough, you could see it on his picture real good. I went to Canada and I visited a museum over there, and they had the presidents there, and they had Abe was in the bed. He looked like he was really breathing.
Really?
Yes. And I looked at Thomas Jefferson, and I forgot the other presidents that they said had some black blood in them. But they never, I didn't know about it until I read it in a paper, and then there was a computer address, and I had one of my grandsons to look it up. And he had got the name of all the presidents that had some black blood in them. So they don't tell us the truth. You know, when I went to school, I didn't hear about but one man that did anything, one black man, and that was George Washington Carver. He did a lot of things with the peanuts. And I didn't know that we had folks like Harriet Tubman. That's one of my favorite strong black women. If we would go back into something like that today, we don't have anybody strong enough to do what those people did. She was married, but she didn't hardly get to be with her husband at all because she had to do all her traveling at night, regardless of the weather. There's one group of people, they're called Amish. They're white people. They are the only people I've ever met who don't see color. And a group of them moved back to the little town where my sister lived. So I've been around them for a long time. And they are wonderful, wonderful people. They don't change with the style.
Yeah.
Their children don't change. And after the 8th grade, they don't have any more schooling. Now, some people call them a cult or whatever, but they're kind. I could go and spend the night at their house, but they couldn't come to our house because we had electricity. And the boys, when Daddy would get some of the boys sometime to help him, they couldn't use nothing modern could they use. And if they did, and their parents found out about it, they couldn't come back and help my father anymore. They don't dress all up. Everybody wears, they look alike, you know.
Right.
So now I like those people. I told my sister, I said, when I come back home to visit, if I get to go back, I said, I'm going to ask them, do they have any black Amish? I've never seen any, but and see when you remember, I don't know if you remember when the guy went in a school in Pennsylvania and shot some kids. They didn't even press charges against him. They're the most different people. They're even different than black people. Because now, and they used to have my mom, if they had to go a long distance, they would pay her to take them places. Very kind, very kind.
Yeah. Wow.
But just around town there and visiting, it's horses and buggy. And I don't care how cold it is, they just wrap up and they raise the most of their food that they eat too.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned you read the Bible a lot. Did you grow up really religious? Or, how did that play into your life?
Real good.
Yeah.
Because I used to sing a lot at church. So it helped me with my singing, and I still sing at churches. And I never did want to go to sing in the other part of the world. Because my grandmother she was very, she loved the Lord a lot. And so she just kind of passed it on down through the family. And I've had a lot of things happen to me too, because my husband, before we divorced, he used to drink a lot. And he shot me. Bullet went in there and come out there. And you can never tell it. That's when we quit.
Yeah.
We had problems before, but I just couldn't take that anymore. So after that, that's when I got a closer walk with the Lord. I guess I'd say I had just heard about him then. But when he brought me through that bullet wound, I got a closer walk with him. And I fell in love with him because of how he had always watched over me. I call him he, she, or the Spirit had always watched over me. And I didn't realize it. But when I realized how good and the things that he kept me from, some of it was unseen, that dangers that he kept me from, then that's when you fall in love with something, that's when you try your hardest to please him. And see, I believe he had the love in my heart, put the love in my heart for people and for the children and all of that. Because I'm a firm believer that if you are a child of God, or Jehovah, or whatever else he's been called or is called, you have his DNA, and his DNA is love. So if I don't see love in a person, I know they don't know anything about the Creator that I serve. Because the Creator that I serve, I've lived in this area. Because the two rich families that I lived with right down the street on Spear, I lived there, and then I got an apartment, live here, and I don't have 30 cents or live, and I worked for a judge and his wife for quite a few years, and when the wife got up in the night one night and fell and bumped her head, and she just died immediately the next day. And so I was with Judge Moore when she died, and just before he died, he gave me a Land Rover. So sometimes I can walk out of here and I look like I got $1 million in the bag, and I get the Land Rover, and I don't have 30 cents anymore. So if you try to do your best, it's amazing how that Spirit, that Creator, can do things. Now I wear a hat all the time too, and people ask me, why you wear a hat all the time? I said, well, when I was a little girl, we got a new straw hat every year, and because I had to work in the gardens and things like that, we raised everything that we ate almost. So I got used to wearing a hat. So a lot of people call me, that kind of know me, because I've been here now since 2005. So we used to have a Safeway store over there, and they would call me the lady with the Land Rover and wears a hat all the time.
That's funny.
So
growing up or living in Colorado during the Civil Rights Movement, what did that look like for you?
Well, I was glad, but that it was taking place, but sometimes it would get so out of hand. Like I remember one day. They was having a march, and I lived at 28th and High, and the cops came around and told me to close all my windows and get my kids in because they was shooting and running. And I just wish we could solve it without so much anger getting involved. Like the Patty Hearst thing, they're showing that again on TV, and I guess I just wish we wouldn't fuss and fight. I wish we could just sit down and talk like you and I are talking, and if somebody says something that is not right, you can answer back without an anger thing, you know. I just don't like getting angry a lot.
Right.
Because my parents, they didn't allow me and my brother and sister, we couldn't fight, we couldn't fuss with one another. My daddy did not allow that. You're brothers and sisters, so you're supposed to get along.
Right.
And my parents did not argue in front of us either. I don't know when they argued. They might have took rides to do it.
Yeah.
And my dad and my mother didn't say bad words at all. My dad would say bad words sometimes to the hogs or cows. The hogs would root, you know, and get through the fence. Well, then he might say a bad word about them then.
Yeah.
He said, I'm going to put some rings in you SOB's nose. But that's the only time I ever heard him say bad words.
Wow, so did you get along really well with your siblings?
Yes, oh yes. Yeah.
That's important.
Well, my brother, he's dead. He was the youngest, and he passed away in 2009. But it was due to these similar to opioids.
Oh, wow.
And he was really too old to be doing it. But anyway, he passed away. But my sister and I, she lives back home, and so we talk all the time. I tell her we should talk every day because we don't know about tomorrow, and God has fixed it so we can talk on the phone if we want to talk 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Colorado, you had to pay so much a minute to talk, and but I talked to my mom anyway if I didn't talk with 2 minutes.